What a wild Wednesday night it was in college basketball. Multiple top 25 teams on the road go down and are upset outright by a home underdog. We also only had one top 25 tilt, ranked side versus ranked side, and that took place in Tuscaloosa, Alabama and Florida. A great game where the Crimson Tide were booked as a pregame 9.5-point favorite with one of the highest over-unders you will see in the sport of men's college basketball. 174.5, that because of overtime goes over the number. Alabama prevails in that extra session, 98-93. The Gators do cover as nearly a double-digit underdog. Florida now 4-1 against the spread as a dog in SEC play, but Alabama remains perfect at home in SEC action this season. Now 11-2 in conference play overall.
Yeah, nobody's surprised here that Alabama almost hit 100 points again. Now, granted, you did need overtime where they picked up 13 extra points, but you always know in a game like this where we expected tempo with an extremely high total in the ball game where no team was ever going to be out of this. And quite frankly, it was a back-and-forth affair, which seemed to be the Florida Gators getting the best of the Alabama Crimson Tide for most of the night until the end of the game when it counted here. And also in overtime, as a backer, when you take a dog, you know how that works out. You have a great handicap. It's tied at the end of regulation. You got 8, 9, 10 points to deal with, and it evaporates quickly because we know if you get a 2 or 4 point lead early, you start to press as the other team, then you start to foul, you're in the double bonus because it's overtime, and you get those free looks here. So at least Florida was able to hold on at the end of that game. But this is one of those games you look forward to also from the Florida Gators moving forward. They show how talented they are at times here, just letting some of these games slip away. And when you take a look coming into conference championship play and then into March Madness, these are one-off games here. You see the talent with the Florida Gators. They can go toe-to-toe one of the best teams in the country in their own building here. And also, Alabama, ultra efficient on offense, loves the three-point shot. You go on the road and you stymie them from the three-point line. Florida should have won that ball game, but looking forward to March Madness here, I'm not taking anything away from the Gators. I liked what I saw out of both teams last night. A lot of fun, a lot of scoring, and a lot of covering for your boy DRS.
Florida now 18-8. Overall, 8-5 in SEC action. The net rankings have not been updated as of this morning. Still too early here on the early line. But Florida entered last night in Tuscaloosa 29th in the net. They are very much in position to have an at-large bid, really not even on the bubble, firmly into the NCAA tournament field of 68 right now. And they'll probably be a 8, 9, 10 seed, something of the sort. It may be a very dangerous one at that. Will Clayton Jr. last night, 27 points, game high, leading Florida. Again, 4-1 against the spread as a dog in SEC play. Alabama now over in 9 of its last 11 games. That is Nate Oates basketball, 2 of the 40 fastest tempos in college hoops on display last night in Tuscaloosa. We stay in the SEC for a thriller down in the Bayou. The Bayou Bengals of LSU, the unranked home underdog against the ranked road team, 17th ranked Kentucky, who entered winning 3 straight games on the road in SEC play and was booked as a 5.5-point favorite. What a wild final 40 seconds it was. LSU had a 4-point lead under a minute left. Rob Dillingham took over for Kentucky. The talented freshman, a hoop and a harm, the game-leading jumper under 20 seconds remaining. LSU comes down. They look for a bucket with Jordan Wright. It is stuffed. He grabs his own stuff off the deflection, throws it back up, and as time expires, there is Tyrell Ward for LSU. The game-winning bucket at the buzzer, 75-74, the victory for the Bayou Bengals. Donnie, they win outright as a 5.5-point home dog.
So talented, but still coming up short here at times here for the University of Kentucky. If you tell me they're going to go on the road and be perfect, Ben, from the free throw line and also shoot an additional 40% from the three-point line, you should be able to come away with a victory. And also being up 15 points at one point in the second half, right after the first minute of play on back-to-back three-point shots. Then you take a look at this Kentucky team. Reeves was wonderful, 25 points in 33 minutes. Dillingham coming off the bench, playing 22 minutes and giving you 23 points. And then there's the players you expect to step up and say, you're no longer fresh. freshmen. Guys like DJ Wagner, who played 21 minutes in this game, didn't even score a point here. These are some of the guys that have to step up in those biggest moments, but it's a team still learning how to win at this point. Yes, they should have won that game, but yeah, now Cal maybe has their ear and goes, you know what? We're up 15. We let this slip away. Let's not draw back on that again. Let's close these games out on the road. Because granted, it's still hard to win, and the SEC is a very good basketball conference. But for Kentucky, with a 15-point lead on the road, you got to close the door on LSU. They weren't able to do that last night, Ben.
And that 15-point advantage evaporated quick in the second half. LSU had already tied the game up with about 13 minutes and 40 seconds remaining at 46 all. Kentucky now, after they snapped their 2-game win streak, has gone under in 3 straight. If there is a benefit, Kentucky is playing better defense, not as much of a track meet as we have seen throughout the early portion of this season for the Cats. Again, LSU, 2 consecutive wins over ranked opponents. South Carolina over the weekend against Kentucky last night. Duke playing its best basketball here near the end of February. John Shire in year number 2 has the Blue Devils playing some great hoops at the moment. A 29-point victory margin last night on the road in Coral Gables against Miami, 84-55. Duke booked as a 6.5-point favorite, did not suffer the similar fate that we saw last night of a ranked team on the road, booked as a favorite, losing outright to a home underdog. Total of 148.5 stays well under because Duke D'd up against Miami. 5 straight wins for the Blue Devils, 5 straight covers, 5 straight unders.
Yeah, really good performance by the Duke Blue Devils and expected from my end of it here. But also, it's more of a microcosm of what's going actually on with the Miami Hurricanes this year. So much talent coming back. Now, granted, still a little bit banged up at this time in the season. Reworked NIL deals. You make a good run in the playoffs, in March Madness last year. You're just not able to replicate that. 15-12, barely above 500, now sinking to 6-10 over on the ACC, which some years you would say, man, like, hey, man, ACC is really tough at this point. It's not a tough ACC this year, at least as tough as what we've seen in the past few years, but don't take anything away from Duke. Going on the road, shooting 52% as a team, which included 45% from three-point range. But the same questions are rising up for Miami. They just haven't been a good offensive team, particularly in ACC play. They shoot 31% from the floor as a home team, 24% from three-point range. That's not going to get it done even in a close game. They get blasted by 30 last night, and you're right. Duke is playing really good basketball at the right time.
You know what's so interesting about Miami? Not even the run to the Final Four last year. 2 consecutive trips to the Elite Eight, and a lot of that talent back, although they did lose Isaiah Wong and to name a few others. But a disappointing and interesting season for the Canes, to say the least. Now we go out to the Mountain West, which might be the best league in college basketball. 6 of the 11 teams from the conference seem as though they are set to be in the NCAA tournament as of this moment. And what a game we had out in New Mexico. The Lobos booked as a 7.5-point home favorite, despite being the unranked side against 22nd ranked Colorado State. Do prevail 68-66, but it wasn't easy. New Mexico up by 8, under 6.5 minutes remaining. Colorado State comes all the way back to make it a ball game. New Mexico does prevail at home, 68-66.
Yeah, one of the few games I missed out on yesterday. I thought the Colorado State Rams would have been a nice play at over 74.5. They come up short at 66. Would have been nice for that game to actually go to overtime, but it didn't. But looking at two teams that aren't ultra relying on the three-point line, you take a look at Colorado State shooting 30% from the three-point line last night and then 33% for New Mexico here. The tempo was there, just didn't get the shot making. 41% from the floor for Colorado State and then 37% from the floor for New Mexico. But these two teams at the top of the standings, both probably headed towards March Madness. That's a close game we anticipated here, but yet again, a team that's ranked going on the road against a team that's unranked got the win, just not the cover last night for that home team.
7 lead changes in the final minute and 30 seconds of regulation between CSU and New Mexico last night. Keep the name Isaiah Stevens close in your mind, a stud for Colorado State that could make some noise in the big dance. More around college basketball up next here on the Early Line. Live right here on the Early Line on this Thursday, still recapping a wild Wednesday night in college basketball with just 1 week left in the month of February before March. What does all the madness already happening mean for the sport as we get into the craziest month of the calendar year? Last night, Donnie, a big trend emerged. We saw 3 home underdogs pull off an outright upset against a ranked foe. That includes in the Atlantic 10, George Mason. A stunner last night at home for George Mason, 71-67, the final against the Dayton Flyers, who entered as a 3.5-point home favorite. They were 11-2 in A10 play, 3.5-point road favorite, I should say. But George Mason has now covered in its last 4 games as an underdog in A10 play, including 2 outright victories. A big win for George Mason last night.
How do you pull off the upset here? Well, why don't you shoot 29% from three-point range at home while the road team that's better than you shoots 42%? How does that happen? Taking advantage, Ben, of the free throw line. You see Dayton goes on the road and shoots 10 of 14, which isn't bad, 70% roughly as a team. But flip that over to George Mason, 24 of 29 from the charity stripe, 83% as a team. That's how you make up those extra possessions here. But didn't it feel like this was one of those games that fits the mold? And also on radio yesterday, on Moneyline, Kevin and I talked about this game. It's like, Donnie, what do you think about Dayton? I haven't paid all that much attention, to be honest, to the A10 this year. I'm like, okay, 11-2 going on the road. Hey, could Dayton be one of those teams that can surprise and be one of those, hey, you know what? We can win 2 games here, make it to a Sweet 16. But this is one of those that shows us it's, again, really hard to win no matter what conference you're in or who's actually the home team here. Dayton should have won that game going away, but George Mason bit them. And that's quite frankly what we've been seeing for the past couple weeks here. Ranked teams on the road getting beat outright here, and it happened again last night in the A10.
One of the great underrated stories in college basketball this year, certainly in the A10, Tony Skinn, his first year as the head coach for George Mason. He was a part of that Patriots team under Jim Larinaga way back in 2006 that made the run to the Final Four. So Skinn back at his alma mater. George Mason 18-8. Unless they win the A10 tournament, they are not going to go to the NCAA tournament this year, but building in the right way in Fairfax. 3 straight wins for George Mason. We shared they have covered in their last 4 games as an underdog in A10 action. So here we are again. 3 home underdogs. Last night winning outright against a ranked opponent. We saw it with LSU at the buzzer. The wild finish inside Rec Hall in State College, Pennsylvania. For Penn State, the upset over Illinois. And George Mason gets in on the fun in the A10. An outright upset over Dayton. Donnie, a couple of other trends to pay attention to. New Mexico was the unranked home favorite last night against Colorado State. The Lobos do not cover as a 7.5-point home favorite, but in the month of February, home unranked favorites against a ranked road team, now 8-3 straight up, 7-4 against the spread. Another scenario we saw last night in the only top 25 tilt that we had, Florida against Alabama. The home team in those top 25 matchups, now 30-8 this season, 23-13-2 against the spread. All of those big trends, something to pay attention to here down the home stretch of conference action. 5-6 games left in the high major level before we get to conference tournaments and really where that madness intensifies.
Yeah, and also you're saying you could have used that sort of play last night on the Miami Hurricanes at home. Now, they got smoked here, but it seems like that trend's setting up like, okay, we got 5 or 6 games left in our season to make a stand. We need one of these quad one victories to try to impress the committee here. And you're seeing more than not these teams at home upsetting ranked opponents, which are massive wins and great for the schedule makers here moving forward to say, you know what, look at these games that we won. We are playing our best basketball down the stretch. So maybe you can put that in your pocket here. We'll see how it finishes up. But usually when trends are this hot, they tend to even out. We'll see if it does, but right now it doesn't look like anything stopping this trend here from not working anymore.
The only other ranked team in action last night that we have not mentioned yet in the opening hour of this show, 7th-ranked Marquette. After getting drubbed by 28 on the road in Hartford against UConn over the weekend, the Golden Eagles respond. If you want to bounce back, you want to paw into your arena. The Blue Demons now 0-15, winless in Big East play. Marquette put up 105. They won 105-71. The Golden Eagles covering as a 26.5-point home favorite. Cam Jones, a game-high 34 points for Shaka Smart's team. Now we take that into the big picture conversation where the national championship odds are in the final week of February before March, with it on the horizon from where they were at the very beginning of this season in early November. UConn, the defending national champs, had a 22-1 price before the year got underway. We're not the favored side then. Now the shortest number at 5-1. Houston and Purdue both at 8-1. The Boilers entered the year with one of the two shortest prices, and that price has gone even shorter by $3 at 8-1. Houston in the Big 12, we had some questions now playing with the big boys. The Cougs in first place with sole possession of that top spot in the Big 12 Conference at this moment. $12 shaved off that price. $14 off the number for Arizona. 25-1 before the year, now plus 1,100. Tennessee, the price is shorter. North Carolina, the price is shorter. Alabama, the price is shorter. Those, the 7 best numbers as we approach the month of March all around college basketball.
Yeah, if you were guessing right on those two ball clubs there up at the top of that graphic, Connecticut and Houston, now sitting at 5-1 and 8-1, when you could have got them over 20-1 a piece. It seems like a fantastic number. We'll see where they wind up, but it's probably not going to get back to 10-1, 12-1, 14-1. Those prices are gone, but it's interesting also to see Purdue still hanging around that level. But I don't get upset about, we really missed out on those numbers. No, as you pointed out, the goal is to cash in a ticket here. And if you're taking a look and say, well, Donnie, I really don't even bet futures until we see the brackets, well, you're probably a smart man for doing that, as opposed to betting these numbers right now, because it's always apparent and the arguments always come through on Selection Sunday. We'll talk about it right away. Wow, did you see UConn, the number 1 overall seed? They got the easiest break here, but my goodness, the number 2 overall seed, the Houston Cougars, they might have the hardest, ticket here or path to try even to get to the Final Four, or yet alone the Elite 8 at this point. So we'll watch it play out as it goes, but it's interesting to see how some of those big numbers, but also if you would have asked us now right at the beginning of the season, hey, by the way, UConn and Houston are going to be really good. Yeah, we probably would have expected that. So maybe you jump on those total numbers that you saw at the beginning of the season. But for my money now, also with Houston, we were worried about them starting the Big 12 season. Hey, look at that. A couple losses in a row. Maybe they're not cut out here for this Power 5 conference. But granted, they are cut out for it. They're going to do damage in March. But interesting to see those numbers nonetheless.
Houston has now been the number 1 ranked team in the Ken Palm efficiency ratings that looks at the entire country in college basketball at a 362 at the D1 level. Houston has been number 1 now for 86 consecutive days and counting. A huge one for the Cougs on the road on Saturday in Waco against top 15 Baylor, after the Bears suffered a defeat a couple of nights ago on the road in Provo against BYU. Donnie just made an excellent point that I really want to hammer home. When you look, and it's hard to compare, I guess, sports at times, but look at the odds from way back at the beginning of the year in November. Purdue was one of the co-favorites at an 11-1 number. That is a very long price. UConn, the reigning national champs, were 22-1, and that was one of the 5 best numbers available to bet to win a national championship this year in men's college basketball. Look at the NBA before the year got underway. Boston, Milwaukee, plus 380. Denver and Phoenix, plus 550. Short numbers. Look at next year in the National Football League. The Niners around a 5-1 price at this moment to win Super Bowl 59. Even in college football, Georgia is a 3-1 favorite. Those postseason tournaments in the playoffs that we see in those respective sports are a lot different than what we love about March. It is madness for a reason, but it is also the NCAA tournament, a part of a field of 68 where you have to play your best for a 2.5-week stretch over the span of 6 games if you want to cut down the nets as a national champion. That's why the odds are so long before the year gets underway, because it's relatively random. You can be the best team in the country throughout the entirety of the regular season over a sample size of 30-plus games. If you have one bad night in the round of 32, it does not matter. Donnie, that's why we say, you made the point right there, unless you are really convinced that one of these teams that you will see in the top 10 of the national championship odds is your team to get to the Final Four, to win a national championship, to provide you profitability on that number, it probably doesn't make sense to bet these prices until the bracket is revealed in 24 days on Selection Sunday, because the best coaches in college basketball will tell you our resume be damned. Our seed line, be damned. It does not matter. What only matters is the matchups, thus the path in our region to get to a Final Four and win a national title.
Exactly, and the arguments start right away. The minute Selection Sunday is over, what do? We start taking a look at some teams like, how the heck did they wind up on the 6 line? We thought they should have been a 3 line. And also, if you're not looking at those, born and bred blue blood teams, like let's just say Houston gets a tough draw, you might be looking at 2 great mid-majors in their way with fifth-year seniors aboard, trying to knock you off, going like, man, I wish they would have been in another bracket at this time. It'll be fun to watch it play out. We'll fire away at that time. But right now, you're sort of in that holding pattern, trying to take those notes and see exactly where these teams wind up, and then once we get to Selection Sunday, you'll be able to go and make an informed decision there and bang away with some pretty good prices.
Note these prices right now. Mark the movement over the next few weeks until Selection Sunday, and then you really start to bet based on what the path looks like through the Midwest region or the East region, based on the 2-7 matchup, so on and so forth.